Okay, so I don't know how other people are going to feel about this, and I understand that I might have a bias just being a massive Rurouni Kenshin fan that I am, but I did say in the last review that this episode, episode 5, because of the subject matter they were dealing with, because of the moment that the characters were going to experience, that this was probably going to be a make it or break it episode for me. Whereas this is the first episode since the new Kenshin series had started where you have to hit a very strong emotional beat and you have to be pretty action heavy between the fight between Kenshin and Sanosuke. So you have the action elements to consider, you have the emotional elements to consider, and of course you have the tone, right? The music, the presentation, how it was all going to work. And I gotta say that I think they pulled it off really, really well. Now, again, I don't think that this is as good as the 90s series, but this does give me a lot of hope and a lot of promise for the future of this Kenshin series, especially if this is well received and continues to get good production and continues to get better animation and better music as the time goes on. But I think that this was serviceable enough, and I think that it worked doing everything that it needed to do to make this a really, really good episode for me. So I'm on board, you guys. I'm on board. And call me biased, call me whatever you want. Maybe I've just been waiting 20 years for Kenshin to come back in anime form, and I'm just really excited. But if this was shit like Berserk 2016, I would be admitting it. I would be saying it. If this was, as bad as some other anime adaptations of properties I've loved, I wouldn't feel bad saying that, yeah, the quality is awful. But I really, truly do think that they're doing as good a job as they can. Again, it's not going to be as good as the 90s series, but it does hold a lot of promise. Especially they have been continuing to adapt the manga honestly and truly and not add in filler and no filler scenes and no filler characters. And I don't mind if they do have some anime-only stuff here and there kind of sprinkled in as the story goes along, but so far they haven't. And I think that if they continue that and it continues going down this road, then by the time we get to the end, this is going to be a full definitive version and adaptation of the Kenshin manga. Also, real quick, I'm sorry if this video is a little bit awkward because I got a different monitor, so I'm trying to angle the webcam the same way it was before, but it won't be the same because this monitor is taller. I also had to fuck around with like the video effects and stuff like that, so I really don't know where I want to sit and how the camera's going to perceive me, because usually my microphone is over there, but now if I'm over here, I'm way too low. So I'm trying to be like in the frame more. That's just a me problem. That has nothing to do with Kenshin, but if there's any awkwardness in the video, that's why. I'm figuring out my new angle. This episode had to do something really important, and that is to show us the background of Sanosuke Sagara going as Zanza, the fighter for hire, a guy that gets paid by other people to beat people up, right? Kind of being a hypocrite in his own way, kind of standing up for people that are oppressed, but at the same time going around and essentially being a bully for hire, right? So he's in this situation where he has to face Kenshin, and doing the research that he's done, he's realized that Kenshin once went by the name Batosai the Manslayer, who was a Hitokiri, an assassin for the imperialist army that basically won the War of Japan. So 10 years ago, the Meiji era started, and that is because the imperialists are the ones that eventually succeeded within the war. So Kenshin was on the side that brought in this new era. And as we've seen in the previous episodes, there's a lot of corruption still going on. And the more that we kind of unravel it, the more that we kind of understand the behind the scenes of whatever's happening in the world of politics, which the series doesn't focus too much on, but it's always something that's kind of there looming in the background. It's kind of like politics are kind of like an antagonist in a way in this series, right? Just like in real life. So without Kenshin's help, without what Kenshin did within his role of being that Batosai the Manslayer, the Imperialists might have not won. So Sanosuke attributes their victory to Kenshin, and he attributes Kenshin as this representation of the Imperialists themselves. And that in itself, of them winning the war and, causing some corruption, that might not be so bad on its own. That's probably going to happen with any political affiliation. But he has a very specific history tied into these imperialists with the Sekio army. In the old 90s series, they translated it the Sekihotai, which I think just means Sekio army in Japanese. I don't know. I don't speak Japanese. I just watch a lot of Kenshin. So he had the leader of their group, Captain Sagara. And he was a guy that Sanosuke really looked up to and idolized. And it was really important for this episode to nail the idea that, Captain Sagara was like a father figure to Sanosuke. He was everything to him. He was an idol. He was an inspiration. He was a mentor. He was somebody that, Sanosuke would have followed until death. And then I love that they have Sanosuke's friend Kato here too, that you only see as a child, but may or may not come into play at some point without spoiling too much. And so they were working for the imperialists, but because they were kind of going around saying that they were going to raise taxes and stuff like that, they were basically just kind of, they were the messengers, right? They were doing what the imperialists told them to do until they realized that people were really disliking what was happening. And in order to not lose favor within the masses of the people, they basically used the Sekio army as their scapegoat, saying that they were a false imperialist army, that they didn't represent them, and they made an example out of them. This horrible betrayal where they murdered the entire army and then literally put their heads on display. Sanosuke had to go and see the severed head of his mentor. And this wasn't just like one singular shot. The 90s series is actually more heavily censored because of the time that it came out. So this series actually showed a lot more of, it wasn't really gore, but we really stayed on the shot of the severed head of Captain Sagara for quite a bit. Like, it really let you soak that moment in. And so I really appreciated the episode doing that, not just so I could look at a severed head, but because of the impact that it meant for Sanosuke. It was a really, really profound moment of betrayal and darkness, and Sanosuke realizing that the people, the powers that be, are not necessarily what they say they are. And the imperialists did a lot of horrible shit in order to get to the point where they're now in this new era where, the borders are open up more and, Japan is becoming more expansive and there's new technology and there is a lot of good that is happening, but that good is only happening because of the darkness and chaos of war, of the horrible things that you have to do during war in order to bring an era of peace. But Kenshin himself doesn't even necessarily agree with that, right? He's not about it, and that's why he chose not to accept a position within those higher realms of authority. He doesn't want to be associated with it. He did his part, he did his time, and now he's trying to find some sense of redemption. He's trying to make amends for the things that he did. Now, there's specific things that he did that play into how he became a wanderer that we're not supposed to know about yet as an audience, but for Kenshin as a character now, he has become a wanderer. He's become somebody that can protect people on a person-by-person basis, and he doesn't involve himself with that. But Sanosuke doesn't see that. Sanosuke only sees him as a representation of that betrayal. And so this fight that they have is supposed to be very, very important between these two characters because Kenshin is slowly realizing, oh, Sanosuke was part of the Sekio army that he knows about. He wasn't involved with it, but he knows about it. And, Sanosuke just the same. He can't bring himself to lose to this person that meant so much to that, side of the war, right? But we also have a very significant power difference. Now, I would say this is probably the first real fight of the series, but Sanosuke is not on Kenshin's level. But what Sanosuke is a motherfucking tank that can take a shit ton of hits, a shit ton of damage. The man gets beat up for a living or beats people up for a living. He's used to taking damage. So he's one of the few characters that ever stand up after Kenshin hits him. He does the Ryosoi-sen, which was awesome to see. Hits him a bunch of times, hits him again over the head, and then several times, and Sanosuke just keeps getting back up. So this is very important to tell you about this character, that when Sanosuke believes in something, he is a bit stubborn, but he isn't going to allow himself to just lay down and roll over because of what happened to that Sekio army. They were kind of used as scapegoats and then swept under the rug, and he's not going to allow himself to be that. So they both have really important reasons for this fight that they're in right now. And I thought the music choices that they used, again, not as good as the 90s series, but I thought, I don't know if they used this theme earlier. I don't remember hearing it, but they used it kind of as Captain Sagara's theme throughout the episode, and I thought it was really, really well done. It's no departure, if you know that from the 90s, but it still was something that I think worked very, very well. And even though Kenshin wins and Sanosuke does not get a hit on Kenshin, he still has this moment where he gets the beginnings of understanding Kenshin as a character. I wouldn't say they're best friends right away or anything like that, but he understands that Kenshin is saying he feels like the revolution is not over. The war might be done, but there is still inequality. There's still injustice. There's still horrible things that are happening. And Kenshin, only by a person-by-person basis, is just trying to help the best that he can and trying to do right and trying to make amends and trying to find redemption. Whereas Sanosuke was just kind of throwing himself into more violence and throwing himself into more chaos. And, it's not like a immediate shift or immediate switch, but he does kind of recognize that in Kenshin, that if you can do something that you disagree with, or you are that hypocrite now, well, there's reasons for your change. And it's the idea that people can change and they can have different ideas and they can try to be better than what they were before. Whereas Sanosuke really wasn't trying. He was just kind of throwing himself into violence because that's all he knew. But seeing Kenshin, somebody that's known as Batosai the Manslayer, being able to do this, well, it kind of changes something in him. So overall, I really enjoyed this. Like, again, like maybe I'm being biased. Maybe I'm just a Kenshin fanboy and I can't see the horrible things about it. I don't know. Look, there are some moments where I think the animation's a little stunted. There are definitely moments where I think it could be better. And it's hard to compare it to what I find to be one of the better animes ever. But like I said, because the 90s series has so much filler, it's heavily edited, and it doesn't necessarily follow the manga exactly, I think that this new version is going to be a more comprehensive adaptation of the manga from start to finish when all is said and done. The only other great thing about this was after the credits, there was a tease of the next episode, and I'm stoked, bro. Especially, I will say, my favorite musical cue in this episode was the tease for the next one. Like, if that turns out to be Janae's theme, dude, I'm in 100%, man, because I thought the music was only getting better there. And just to give a tease for those that may be experiencing Kenshin for the first time, the little tease of the next episode that you saw may be the first character that is going to give us some actual problems or some actual difficulties. So I'm very, very excited to get to him. I'm excited for the story arc that comes after that. From this point out, it's going to pick up. I don't think it starts slow at all, but you could say the first 3 to 4 episodes, the stakes are very low. There's nobody for Kenshin to really fight, and we're kind of building our world building, we're getting our cast assembled of our characters and stuff like that. So I would say these first 5 episodes are kind of our building blocks, right? From this point forward, we're going to start getting into kind of story arcs. The Wandering Swordsman arc really kind of picks up. So if you've gone through it for the first time and you like it enough so far, I'm going to tell you, starting from this point forward, the story only goes up and continues to go up. So if you like it enough, if you're on board enough, if you watch the first 5 episodes and you're like, okay, this is kind of cool, I kind of dig it, I'm telling you, from this point forward, it's going to be great, man. This is where it starts to actually become really good. So, yeah, tell me what you guys thought of this particular episode. It adapts chapters, I wrote it down, chapters 7 and 8, I believe, of the manga. Yeah, chapters 7 and 8. So if you want to follow the manga, those are the chapters that it adapts. And yeah, I'm super stoked for the next one. So let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Leave your thoughts, theories, ideas down below. Try not to spoil too much moving forward for the new Kenshin fans. If you're an old Kenshin fan, how do you like it compared to the 90s series or the manga? And other than that, guys, give the video a like and a comment to help it out in the algorithm, because it will really help me. And if you want to support the channel on that deeper level, I do have Patreon, channel memberships, merch store, all that stuff linked down below, as well as the various social media links where you can follow me. Also, follow me on Instagram, because there's another real life Ryan on Instagram that has more followers than me. And like, what the fuck's up with that, man? Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you next time.